growing up in Altoona and more.
Okay, Altoona was a big railroad town, Pennsylvania Railroad. The PRR at the time, this is the 40s, 50s, early 60s, was the largest railroad in the United States. And we didn't have a lot of the trucks that we have today that go all over the place delivering this, that, and the other. And a lot of it was done by train. And PRR was really big. And Altoona, at the time when I graduated from high school, it was like 75,000. Today it's probably about 45,000. And the 30,000 difference is the PRR guys that are out of work and have gone on to other things, and families that have relocated as a result of it. But concerning my tooth, this happened in 6th grade, and I didn't think anything about it. I mean, I was loving life. I've always enjoyed life a lot, and sports, and so I was competing out on the field. That's the local field, the elementary school field that we all went to play basketball, play football, play baseball, etc. And I was in Little League and all the rest of that. And I was just this little guy, but I was fast, very fast, and shifty, you know. And I prided myself in that. And if I would have been bigger, and if I would have continued my growth without this problem with my tooth, I think I could have done well on the high school football team as a receiver or even as a running back, because we had a drill in junior high. I played football in junior high, and we had this drill where all the team would line up in a circle, and they give the ball to one guy, and they have 2 guys in there, maybe even 3 guys, trying to tackle this one guy. And every time I was in there with these 2 or 3 guys, it took them forever to get me, because I would just fake the hell out of them, or was so quick and fast. But I wasn't very big. I'm this 5'2" guy, 120 pounds. And, you know, guys who were continuing to develop, they were like Jack is, you know. And Jack's no 120 pounder, you know, and he's not 5'2". And so that's where the running backs came from, and that's where the main part of the ball club came from as a junior high school. And we had it was amazing back in those days. Junior high school was almost as prevalent as high school football. I mean, they had a baseball team, we had a basketball team, and there were all these other junior high schools in the area. I mean, it was big time competition. Anyhow, I started my growth, this accident with the teeth, and but I was still enjoying everything, and went off to college. I knew I wanted to go to college, but my dad wasn't making a lot of money, and I had 3 younger sisters, and my mother wasn't working, and so if I was going to go to college, it was going to have to be on a shoestring, so to speak. And in doing that, you don't want to be taking on engineering at Penn State and hitchhiking 25 miles each way to get to school. And I joined the Navy ROTC, not because I was particularly interested in the Navy, but they were the one ROTC program that had a stipend that you would get monthly. And that might have been $25 or $35 or something. And then in the summertime, you'd go on this cruise, and they'd pay you for that too. And they had sharp-looking uniforms, and you had to take ROTC, everybody did, for at least 2 years. And it wasn't on my mind to go in the Air Force, although when I was a kid, 5 years old, I look back on it now, and that was sort of a signature moment because, and I don't know if you know about this, if you've ever heard me talk about this, but 1945, I was 5 years old. The war in Europe against Hitler and the Germans was just coming to a halt. And that was huge because when we started the war, they were, probably 500 times more equipped for war than we were. And they were merciless, you know. But when the Japanese attacked us in Pearl Harbor, that prompted everybody in the United States to get with the program, because we knew that, by God, between the Japanese and the Germans, who had an alliance going, that we were up against it, and that they intended to take over our country. And who knows? Hitler could have looked at us like he looked at Jewish people, as not deserving of living. Could have gotten rid of all Americans for all we know. Anyhow, I was too little. This was 1941, December 7th, 41, and the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and we got into the war. So I was just a couple years old, not even a couple years at that point, less than a year and a half maybe. Anyhow, when I was 5, the war ended in Germany, and I mean, there was great celebration, for sure. I don't remember any of that, but what I do remember is this. The fellas who were flying airplanes in Europe, they all got to fly their airplanes back to the United States, and the war wasn't over for them. They were just going right on out into the Pacific to defeat the Japanese, because the Japanese, they weren't quitting. And it wasn't until 6 months later, and 2 atomic bombs that we dropped in Japan, that they decided they'd had enough and they quit. But anyhow, in the spring of 45 and early summer, all these airplanes were heading through America, and one of them came to Altoona, because the big house up on the hill that was really fancy, their son had gone to West Point, and all of the Air Force was part of the Army then. It was the Army Air Force, and so when he graduated from West Point, he wanted to be a flyer. And 5 years old, I'm out in the backyard with the family dog, you know, just another day. I didn't know anything at 5 years old about the war ending or anything like that. And I, never saw an airplane up till that time, because all the effort was to win World War II. There were no airlines. You couldn't buy tires for your car. Food was rationed, because it had to go to the troops, along with feeding everybody in the United States. But everything was rationed, gasoline, everything. But my father was off in the Navy, fighting the war somewhere, and my uncles, they were off in the Army doing their thing. One of the uncles was in the Pacific, the other was in Europe. And anyhow, 5 years old, I'm out in the backyard with the family dog, and all of a sudden, whoosh, this airplane flies over. Oh my God, what was that? And he comes around 3 times. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then, whoo, a victory spiral up into the air. And I'm sure my mother was watching outside the kitchen window, watching me jump up and down. What the? Holy mackerel, that was awesome. It was a P-51 Mustang. And this guy who had gone through West Point was a P-51 pilot. And he was allowed to come over his house, and so all the other pilots were too, and buzz their house and say, hey, we're on our way to Japan, we're going to win there too. But I think my mother thought, boy, that was such a thrill to see her son, jumping up and down. Not long after that, airlines started up again, because we sort of knew we were going to eventually beat the Japanese too. We didn't want to invade them, because they're very strong-willed people, and they were, every man, woman, and child, they'd fight to the very death. So there would have been a lot of casualties in that war had we invaded, and that's why President Truman at the time decided to drop the atomic bomb, because he knew they were very strong-willed. And they didn't give up after the first bomb, so he dropped another one. And that was enough when 100,000 people each time were dying that they thought, oh my, we got to give up. And they did. They didn't know that we only had 2 of those bombs. So there would have been quite a while manufacturing a third and a fourth one, but thank goodness they gave up. Anyhow, when my mother saw me out there with this enthusiasm, not long after that, the airlines sort of kicked up business again. And in order to get people excited about that, our local airport gave like $10 rides for 20 minutes in a DC-3, you know, 2-engine propeller job kind of thing. And my mother, Dad was still in the service. My mother took me and we went on this ride. So all of that got cemented in my brain. And so, who knows, maybe that's how I ended up in the Air Force, you know, because you just don't know what it is, impact it is that creates sort of different routes that you're going to go in life.